I'm Aaron Maté, sitting in for Jimmy Dore, here with Misha Pollan and Malcolm Fleschner. And let's do an update on what's happening in East Palestine, Ohio, this train derailment spewing a toxic disaster. And very little attention to this so far from the government and media, but slowly details are coming out. So here's the latest from News Nation. FEMA withholds help as East Palestine seeks federal assistance. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has denied assistance to Governor Mike DeWine as Governor Mike DeWine seeks federal help for the residents of East Palestine. According to a press release from DeWine's office, he spoke with White House officials early on Thursday morning to request additional help amid concerns over the release of toxic chemicals following a February 3rd Norfolk Southern train derailment in which about 50 freight cars derailed, 10 of which were carrying hazardous materials. The DeWine administration has been in daily contact with FEMA to discuss the need for federal support, the release stated. However, FEMA continues to tell Governor DeWine that Ohio is not eligible for assistance at this time. Dan Tierney, a spokesperson for DeWine, said that FEMA didn't believe the incident qualified as a traditional disaster. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said on Thursday that there were multiple federal agencies present in the neighborhood, and President Biden spoke directly to Governor DeWine to offer federal assistance. But why wouldn't they declare this to be a disaster and bring in FEMA? That's strange. The release of toxic chemicals threatened the health of thousands of people and forced a community evacuation. Although an evacuation order has now been lifted, there is an ongoing concern among residents over air and water quality. Some residents have reported a burning sensation in their eyes as well as headaches. Others have said they have seen dead fish in area streams or had livestock die. The Ohio EPA also said a chemical plume of butyl acrylate in the Ohio River that stems from the derailment is well below the parts per billion that the CDC considers hazardous. They also said no vinyl chloride has been detected in the Ohio River. Several lawsuits have been filed following the disaster. One lawsuit alleges Norfolk Southern's efforts to clean up and mitigate the incident have instead worsened the situation. Malcolm, you've been observing all this. What do you make of the apparent disinterest so far from the federal government in responding to this, not wanting to bring in FEMA?
Well, I think the first thing is that there's a natural reaction on the part of all of American politicians, virtually, and legislators, and certainly the national security state, everybody, when they hear about suffering of Palestinians, is to ignore it. And so it's confusing in that regard, because if anybody's going to get screwed, it's Palestinians, even if they're in the United States, apparently. But this seems like an opportunity for both the Democrats and Republicans to blame each other, but also downplay the importance of it, because they both want to, the Democrats want to blame the Republicans. It's a Republican governor, and obviously the Republican governor wants to blame the Democrats and the Biden administration. But they both also are united in wanting to protect Norfolk Southern, their benefactor and funder, the powerful interest, powerful corporate interest that is ultimately responsible.
Here's Brianna Joy Gray of Rising talking about how industry groups lobbied to exclude toxic chemicals from rail safety regulations, prevent the mandatory application of safer brake systems, and ignore rail worker demands for staffing changes that could improve rail safety. Here she is breaking some of this down.
Over the same time period during which the railroad industry was fighting safety measures, they were also slashing their workforce by nearly 30% and embracing a scheduling strategy known as precision scheduled railroading. Now, if you remember from our rail strike coverage, the scheduling strategy makes it very difficult for rail workers to be able to take any time off. But it also leads to an increase in accidents. Workers are sick, they're tired, and trains that are nearly 2 miles long are being staffed and checked for issues by just 2 rail workers. The train that crashed had a 3-man crew, an engineer, a conductor, and a conductor trainee. Cuts to staff and tight timing means cutbacks on car inspections, which may have led to the axle failure and need to rely on emergency brakes in Ohio. Again, not the new and efficient electric brakes, but the old air brake system. Thanks, again, lobbyists. While the new brake system activates on all the cars at once, the problem with the old brake system is that it operates kind of like a slinky sequentially down the line, and it causes the train to jackknife and derail when the brakes are activated suddenly. Candace Wagner, a freight rail conductor, member of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen Union based in Pittsburgh, and 2022 Socialist Workers Party candidate for governor of Pennsylvania, said, quote, "The rail bosses, backed by the federal government, refuse to address any safety or other substantive issues raised by rail workers through our unions in the recent negotiations. And their lust for profits, the railroad bosses are running increasingly long, heavy trains and pushing on rail workers smaller crews, arbitrary schedules, longer shifts, and more work than ever before. Massive cuts have been made in the operating crafts, car inspectors, mechanical and maintenance of workforces. All this leads to derailments like this."
Crazy. Here is more on the company behind this. Bank of America wrote that Norfolk Southern may have to pay $40 million to $50 million in a casualty charge in 2022. The company generated some $12.7 billion in revenue and $3 billion in profits. Let's hear from our Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. What does he have to say about all this?
Look, rail safety is something that has evolved a lot over the years, but there's clearly more that needs to be done because while this horrible situation has gotten a particularly high amount of attention, there are roughly 1,000 cases a year of a train derailing.
Sounds like you want us to focus on one of those other 1,000 cases, not this one.
I'm so reassured by that. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Should we? Silly to concern ourselves with this one. And there's like 999 other ones. Pete Buttigieg doing a good, bang up job, Pete.
Well, he's right to point out there are other derailments. Here's a brand new one. This is from More Perfect Union. Breaking: a train is just derailed outside Detroit. At least 6 cars came off the track, and one was carrying hazardous materials. It's a footage of that. Amazing this happens just a few months after Biden breaks a rail strike of workers calling for better conditions, including more safety. It's great timing. Here's another tweet. "It is quite honestly a miracle anytime a train carrying something remotely dangerous makes it through Ohio unscathed." Some video of this. Look at this. After years of neglect, these Ohio trains are in desperate need of repair, this video says. It's just crazy. We have all the money in the world to send off for weapons in Ukraine, and meanwhile, events like this happen, and the federal government doesn't want us to talk about it. Here is some footage of the water that some officials are saying is fine.
Wow.
Look at all that.
Look at it.
It's all in the bottom of the creek bed. Now look at it.
That's pretty shocking, Aaron. This is like, I can't believe that, you're so anti-LGBT that you would object to a rainbow in water. It's a hate crime.
You should pitch that to Norfolk Southern, to Pete Buttigieg. They can use that.
That's what I heard.
To defend themselves. Now, of course, Malcolm, you would expect in a time of a toxic disaster like this, where people are being sickened and lives are at risk, that our media will do a good job to hold those responsible to account, focus on the important things, which is the safety of the civilians in East Palestine and the culpability of the companies responsible. Okay, right? We expect that, right? Well, check out the priorities of the New Republic, and they say this: As East Palestine, Ohio residents try to navigate the unprecedented situation, seeking support from their neighbors and from Facebook groups, disinformation is flourishing. Yes, this is what we have to worry about right now after a toxic disaster is disinformation. Mm-hmm. That's the real threat right now to the residents of East Palestine, Ohio. And here's Walter Kern. You see a towering black plume of toxic smoke from intentionally detonated rail cars because they did a controlled burn of this. They see the threat of disinformation. That's right. Yes.
If I had been there, I would have been shielding my children's eyes. Don't look at it. It's disinformation, kid.
Here's the New York Times. After a train carrying toxic material derailed in Ohio this month, right-wing commentators have been particularly critical of their response, using the crisis to sow distrust about government agencies and suggest that the damage could be irreparable. Imagine someone trying to sow distrust about our holy government agencies who are obviously doing such a good job. And Jimmy Dore weighed in on this. Jimmy says this is supposed to be a newspaper. Unfortunately, it's a tool of oligarchy. It's very effective. In fact, if you don't know, you already live in an oligarchy, and this is more proof. All right, Malcolm.
That was probably Putin told him to say that, so I wouldn't put much credence into that.
Doing live stand-up comedy in Tempe, Palm Springs, Milwaukee, Nashville, Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, Cohoes, New York, and Hartford, Connecticut. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets and become a premium member. Get access to all our content.